Hello, my name is Rick Houston, and welcome to the Scene Vault Podcast, your source for all things NASCAR history. Presented by QWare. Maintain excellence.
Today, NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past. That's the day we don't have any future.
1991 Talladega, you break your leg
yeah.
pretty badly. Was there ever a point where you considered maybe hanging your helmet up and picking the guitar up?
No. You know what? And I'm gonna. I've thought about this a lot, and I think you think about things different when you listen. Let me put it this way: sitting at this end of this table, and we're sitting at a long table for these people listening. Sitting at this end of the table looks different than if I go to that end and look backwards. And looking back on my life and this sport, then when the wreck happened, I have to go back to Friday Hassler and Larry Smith and so many guys that I had seen be killed at a racetrack.
Yeah.
My Uncle Randy on pit road, Dave Watson, in the accident and his Jackman at Atlanta. So I grew up, and I, by no stretch of the imagination, I'll just say that I was always in my mind, if you could walk, maybe not walk, but if you could talk and you were breathing when they pulled you out, you just got back in it at some point in time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the way it was, because death was a part of, through the 60s and on into the 70s and stuff, death was just a part of the sport, you know? And it wasn't something a lot of people talked about. But when you're 7 or 8 and you're playing with kids in the infield and then their father is killed and you never see those kids again, it has an impact.
Wow.
You know what I mean? I mean, you don't think about it at that time,
Yeah.
but eventually it begins to set in. And, you know, I think there were a lot of times, man, where you'd see wrecks as a kid and you'd think, oh, and then they would get out and it's like, okay, that's good. Well, you know, you shouldn't have to think that way at 7 or 8 years old. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, people shouldn't, but you do. So I think when the accident happened, man, I could talk. You know, I could breathe. I knew I had a broke leg. I'd had plenty of broke bones. I rode motorcycles my whole life. I had lots of broke bones, so I knew bones would heal. You know, and I was stunned that it was going to be 5 or 6 months. You know, and or maybe longer according to the doctor. But because I hadn't thought about that, but I never thought about not getting back in a race car.
The 1992 Winston
All-Star race.
You are a part of NASCAR history because it's one of the most memorable finishes ever. What do you remember about that finish in the last lap?
Here's what happened. The last lap's incredibly simple for me. We had a good car, but it wouldn't go. It took a lap or two to get it going, but it had a really good car. It was not good in the first segment, and Robin made an adjustment in the second segment, and it came to life. And they dropped the green flag on the last segment, and I don't even know how many laps there were. And anyhow, but I could kill him through 1 and 2, and I got a good run on Earnhardt through 1 and 2. And got down below him, and he just kept coming, and he kept coming, and he kept coming, and he kept coming. And, you know, it's not a points race. You know what I mean? That's all I remember as much as anything else. It's not a points race. So if we're going to stuff it in down here, we'll just stuff it in down here. So when we got there, we both had to slow down and swing out to go around the corner. We weren't coming from the natural position of off the wall into the corner. You had to go from the bottom back out and then get into the corner. And when he turned into the corner, his car was just loose, and he just spun around. When he spun right in front of me, so I had to slow down again. So then here comes Davey. And Davey's coming at a full head of steam. I'm already on the low side, and he's coming so fast there is no blocking. You know what I mean? And for all you people out there, nobody blocked in those days, okay? It was extremely frowned upon. And, so you give him the lane, and he beats you back to the line, but you're doing all you can. And then we touch when we pass the line. And I will say it until the day I die, is I compare that moment when I realized that we had touched to watching a 100-yard dash and watching runners stretch for the line and then fall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You give everything you've got, and once you cross the line, that's it. And when we crossed the line, we touched, and and it was ugly. Davey hit hard, really hard. I don't think, and I've said it too. He called me on Tuesday. I talked to him Monday, and then he called me back on Tuesday or so. He was still in the hospital, I think, and maybe it was Monday, and wanted me to drive his Bush car, and because he wasn't going to be able to run the Saturday race, but the ugly manufacturer thing had begun to raise its head by that point in time in the sport, and you couldn't get out of one manufacturer into another one without them frowning on it. So I didn't have it. So we never had any hard feelings. That what I've said, and Larry McReynolds has said it, and those of us that are left, is you talk about that race, and people still talk about that race, but you talk about the race. You don't talk about a fight. You don't talk about people cussing each other. You talk about the race.
Right.
Because there were never any hard feelings between anybody that went through it. From Robert Yates to Doug Yates to Larry McReynolds to Davey to Bobby to me to Felix to Earnhardt to Childress to everybody involved. It was just a race. You know what I mean? And then we all went home and we came back the next week. And that's the way it was. And that's to me, that's as telling a moment as any other moment when we look, because you want to argue about the pass in the grass that never was a pass, or you want to argue about Rusty and those guys, and Spin and Darrell, but there just wasn't an argument. It was just a race.
Kyle, we've been talking for right at an hour.
Yeah.
Are you okay
Yeah.
on time?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. You might want to leave after this one. 1993 Daytona 500. How are you going to be giving Bobby Hillin a hard time like that?
Oh, it's easy.
Yeah. How are you going to give Bobby Hillin, the nicest person that ever walked in that garage?
Listen, there's lots of nice people that shouldn't be in race cars. Okay, that's
You heard it here first.
No, Bobby is a great guy. Here's why I was mad at Bobby. And the only reason I was mad at Bobby is because Bobby, the wreck had happened. We were coming through, and if you go back, we were coming through, and Bobby should, in my opinion, still to this day, should have held his brake and not let the car roll down the front stretch, because he let the car until all the cars had passed. He should have held his brake because nobody was coming hard after that.
Yeah.
So he just rolled down in front of us. So that's why I gave Bobby a hard time.
Okay. He said that you actually sent him a letter the next week.
Might have. Probably did.
Okay.
I don't know. We've talked about it a million times.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's before people text, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Consider that a tweet.
All right.
Well, in 92 and 93, you finished fifth in points.
Yeah.
Both years. That's got to be an upscale feeling. The mood on the team has got to be pretty high, given that.
Yeah. Yeah. But we'd had, if we go back, we had changed from Gary to Robin, and the sport was changing. Some things were changing. And, I was mid-30s by then.
Yeah.
And, So I think there was a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff changing if we go back to those times. But and we were good. We were good. We just could not seem to catch that. We had a lot of good second place, third place, fourth place. Just could not beat Mark and Dale and those guys. I mean, just couldn't beat them. That's listen. And I've said it before. Everybody's not Dale Earnhardt. Everybody's not Richard Petty. Everybody's not Jeff Gordon. You know what I mean? And I'm a journeyman. I consider myself a journeyman driver. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of the way it was. I won some races, sat on some poles, had a good career. That's the way it is. But we just couldn't. We just got to a place, and that's about as far as we were going to go. That's about as far as we were going to go. I think it was going to take. It was going to take a better driver for them to win more races, or it was going to take a shake-up somewhere. But dang, man, we all got along so good.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't care if you don't like our music, we're going to keep playing it. You know what I mean? It was that kind of thing if you were in a band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't care if anybody comes because we just got along. Everybody just got along so good. So, and then, that began to fall apart, and Barry came over, and I won my last race there with Barry Dodson and Keith Simmons and those guys. And, it was just a different group towards the end.
You did leave Sabco at the end of 96.
Yeah.
How difficult a decision was that?
Crazy story.
Coming from Kyle Petty?
Yep.
No way.
Yeah, this may be one of my crazier stories. So I'm 36. Okay. Adam's 16. All right. And I had looked at my dad. I had gone back and looked at his early career, and where he was at, and my granddad. And here's what happened. My granddad started Lee Petty Engineering. That's what it was called. And then it went to Petty Enterprises. So when my dad came along, that's where he drove. Okay? So, fast forward from 58 to 79, then that's where I drove. So here I am driving for Felix, working out of Charlotte, and I got a 16-year-old coming along, and I got no place for him to drive, no place for him to start. So in my mind, I thought I gotta either go back to level cross, and that was not an option at that time, with what Petty Enterprises was doing. I think Bobby was there. Was Bobby Hamilton there?
I think so.
I think Bobby might have been there. And they were having some success. They were running solid. So I didn't have an opportunity to go back there. I didn't think. So we're flying home on an airplane, and there's a group of us on the airplane. We're with Felix, and we're sitting there, and there's a gentleman on the airplane and he says, we're talking about a bunch of stuff, and Felix has been a little upset because we hadn't been running too good, and this gentleman that's on the plane says, I think this is going to be. I'm going to have to go get another job. I'm going to go. So I'll finish out, or you tell me when you want me to leave, and I'm going to call it a day here at Sabco. And Felix he was a little upset. And he looked straight at me. I'll never forget, he looked straight at me. He said, I guess you'll be the next one to quit. And I said, yeah, I think I'm quitting too. And I said, I'll go through the end of the year and then I'm out. And he said, what?
It was that quick a decision?
Yeah, I was just sitting on a plane. I was sitting on a plane. And like I said, the thought of giving Adam a place had already entered my head. So it wasn't. So I quit on an airplane, and at least thank God they didn't have parachutes because
I was going to say.
So quit on an airplane. Me and the other guy. I'm not going to say who it is. It's up to him to ever say. And we instantly started looking for how to start a team, and I started my own team, PE2. Yeah, found Hot Wheels.
Where was that based out of?
The old Raymock shop.
Okay.
Yeah, we used the old Raymock shop. Bob was still there. Rahili, I'd see him every day, man. And so over towards Concord Speedway.
Yeah.
And so we raced out of there, and it was David Evans and Billy Woodruff and myself and Bobby Kennedy, who did a great job for us. Great job. And that year, I think we run 14th or 15th in points that year, and I was incredibly proud of that group and what we did that year. And at the end of that year, I think we run 1 year out of there, and then I moved it back to level cross. And then when Adam started with his Xfinity stuff, I turned PE2 into an Xfinity team, a Busch team, and gave him a place to drive. And then I had planned on that's just the way it was going to go. We were going to run out of there for a couple of years. I run 1 year out of Raymock, I think, and then went back to level cross and run a couple of years there, which takes me to 97, 98, 99, right along in there, and 2000, right along in there. So that's it.
Kyle, everything happened with Adam.
Yeah.
And you told me this amazing story about you and Dale Earnhardt during the 24 hours of Daytona.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that night?
Yeah. I've said this before. And I'll go back to one step here, is in my mind, when I started this team, when I left Felix and started this team, my goal was to build this team. And then by 2000, 2001, then 2001 was going to be my last year. I wasn't going to drive anymore because I didn't want my career to overlap too deep into Adam's career and back to my dad and my career, where we were in the same place for so long together that financially it wasn't going to be feasible. Only one of us could survive. I wanted Adam to survive. So that's where we were at. So when Adam's accident happened, it is amazing, and I mentioned it earlier, at the fans and how the outpouring from fans and people like that was amazing. And it was also, in some ways, it was strange to watch the way the NASCAR community reacted. Because I don't really think they knew some knew what to say or would come up and talk, and some you would walk through the garage area and they saw you, but they would turn and walk away. And Earnhardt was one of those guys that would come out of the bathroom, and if he came out of the bathroom and saw you, he would instantly go back in the bathroom or duck in between a truck so that he wouldn't have to talk to you. And it was just, and I understood that. I did understand that. I totally understood it. It's not a criticism. And Mark Martin was exactly the opposite. Mark was a guy that would talk to you. So that was exactly that. So it was strange to watch, but you got to know that when another driver has an accident and when another driver is killed, each driver deals with it strange. Drivers are strange people in the first place, but they deal with it different. So anyhow, we're running 24-hour race. I think he and Junior are running the Corvette, and I'm running with Leo Hendry and running a little Porsche, and we're having a good time, and it was a lot of fun. Anyhow, one night, had to be 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, we find ourselves walking back through the garage area. I'm walking back through the garage area, and I see him, and I just ran up to him, and I'm like, "Yeah, we're gonna talk." How you doing?
Have any way of
How you doing?
avoiding it?
Yeah, it was
Wow.
there was no,
Okay.
not at that time in the morning in that garage area. How you doing? You know what I mean? And and he all but broke down, and we went over and sat beside his bus, in the bus lot, and he told me, he said, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to say it, and I didn't want to confront it because I have a son that races, and it hit way too close to home, way too close to home. And he said the every time I knew that I should say something, I just couldn't bring myself to say anything.
Whoa.
And it's funny that and strange that as we go back to that race for the 500, and I'm standing. And we're standing out on which would have been 2001, and we're standing out at driver introduction. Then he comes over and hugs me, and there's a picture of it somewhere.
Yeah.
And he comes, and we're both crying, and and he's got tears in his eyes, and he has the advantage because he wears sunglasses like my dad. But we were both crying, and it was a very, very emotional moment, especially the way that race transpired. But I just don't. He just couldn't. He couldn't make peace with it. You know what I mean? And that's okay. Because everybody deals with grief different. Everybody deals with stuff different. But in the end, it's the one I remember probably as much or more than any of them.
Kyle, with all that being said, before we started recording, I think you were spending some time with this new little boy.
Yeah, with Overton.
Overton. What does having him mean to your life?
It's different.
I got to ask the blunt question. Did you ever expect?
No. Okay. Well, yeah, but hold on. Let's go back.
I know.
Let's go back to this question. Kyle, you went to Daytona and you had never been in a race car before. What was that all about? You know what I mean? So in the true essence of who Kyle Petty is and the way he's lived his life, why wouldn't I have a kid at 59? Okay?
Okay.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
There, it fits like a glove.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To somebody else, you look at it and you think, well, that's strange. But you look at Kyle and you think, yeah, that's about right. That's about right. I tell you what it does do. And we've all been through this because our younger days are behind us. But when you're young, we'll go back to being 18 and 10 foot tall and invincible. And when you're young, life is all about you. It's all about
True.
How much money can I make? How many girls can I impress? How many fast cars can I have? What can I do? Me. Okay? I think you get to a place, eventually you get to a place where you're just not chasing the world. You know what I mean? You're just not chasing it. And then when you have a child, then the world comes back to you. You don't have to chase it. So I think the importance of what time is and giving time and being able to spend time is totally different. And obviously, Austin and Montgomery Lee are older, and I have grandkids. But I look back, and sometimes you do the best you can for your kids. And I did the best I could for Adam and Austin and Montgomery Lee. But then you look at Overton, and it's totally different. I never gave Austin and Montgomery Lee enough time because you were out busting your butt trying to make a living.
Right.
And, it's that old stupid saying where, you should have wisdom and money when you're young. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that you can do that for your kids. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because you realize that when you're older, that it's totally different. So he and Morgan both have been a huge healing part and a huge bright spot in my life, for sure.
Is there going to come a point where he starts to play ball or act or sing or whatever that you might consider getting off the road, or is he going to be tagging along?
No, he'll just tag. He'll have to tag. That's the way. You know what?
Yeah.
It's funny because, and I've said this 1,000 times. Bear Bryant was a football coach, and one day they fired him, and they sent him home, and he sat down in the chair and he passed away.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have football anymore. And Richard Petty was a race car driver who went to the racetrack every weekend. And one day they told him, you can't race, but you can still go to the racetrack. And I honestly believe that's the only thing that keeps him alive. Is if you told Richard Petty he couldn't go back to the racetrack, I think he'd sit down in the chair and he'd just pass away. And we go back to your question to me, which was where do you remember racing? You know what I mean? It's just always been a part of my life. So for me, it is, I can't imagine not going somewhere.
I guess you've heard this in the past, and I'd like to perpetuate it. You are racing's Renaissance man, a man of all talents. How do you think about that? Do you?
No, I don't. Here's what I think. See, and I love the way you put it as a Renaissance man, because my dad puts it, jack of all trades, master of none. So if that constitutes a Renaissance man, then that is me up one side and down there. You know what? It is, and I have said this. I've said this my whole life, and you know this because we've talked. Is I don't. My dad's 82, be 83, and I don't want to be 83 and look back and say, you know, man, one time I had a chance to do that, and I didn't. I want to be that guy that, A, has the whitest legs in the nursing home. That's my first goal. And B, looks back and says, remember that time I rode a bull in Texas? Remember that time I jumped out of an airplane? Remember that time I opened for Hank Jr.? Or you did, or you did something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Remember that. That's who I want to be, because you only get one shot. So if you only get one shot, then you got to take the most with you, and you got to live the most. I've never been. The knock has always been focus on one thing. I could never focus on one thing. I was always off doing a million things, and I'll be 60 this year, and that's not changed.